Hello my dear YouTuber friends, and I do hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to this new video, which is a review of the Aerolite 103 from Nemeth Designs from Microsoft Flight Simulator. Now I got this because Mark from SimHanger Flight Simulation was doing a Discord multiplayer flight the other day for things like Aerolite, Microlight aircraft, that type of thing. And I didn't have one installed, and this was recommended to me. So what I'm going to do in this video is a quick review of the aircraft, a short flight to show you how it handles in the Microsoft Flight Simulator skies. So let's not dilly-dally. Let's get on with the video. Okay, so here we are at Kirkwall Aerodrome, ramp 23, cold and dark, as you can see, in the Aerolite 103. And if you go around, let's start with the external view impressions. If you look at the wings there and the fins, you can see the fabric, kind of folded fabric. You get a real good impression of the fabric materials on the wings on the aircraft. As you can see there, hope that comes through on the video. You get a really good impression of there being fabric on the wings and fins. So very nice. Just going around the front there, you can see our little pilot with his crash helmet on there. Not much to the aircraft, but what is there? Like I said, you get that great impression of there being fabric there, which is great. Let's jump into the cockpit. Quick shout out to Wombleway Dave and Disco Dave. They recommended this aircraft to me for the multiplayer flight we did in the ultralights. And I've got to say, I am rather enjoying this aircraft. Look up top there, you got some switches. We'll come back to them later. And then you got things like your airspeed, altitude, vertical speed, ADF, compass there. Now, let me just show you something. In my settings, go to control options. Make sure I've got my yoke part selected on my velocity one there. Under camera. And these are set up pretty much by default on many controllers. You've got previous pilot position and next pilot position. That's my left PLV hat switch, basically. If I click it down, it's previous, click it up, it's next. So previous pilot position and next pilot position. Keep them in mind. Reason I'm showing you those, if I go to my previous pilot position, down, I get a clearer view of my compass. Click it down again, I get a very clear view of my airspeed, altitude, vertical speed, ADF and fuel. So we'll recommend, if you don't have them set up and you're flying this, set a couple of buttons up for previous and next pilot position. Go to next pilot position when you're in the default view. You get this rather dynamic view out of the aircraft, looking out pretty much over the left wing there and a little bit back. In the air, I mean, look at that. Even on the ground, it looks pretty spectacular. So fully recommend you set those views up. Just go previous pilot position to get to your default cockpit view. If you're a fan of easy startup aircraft, you're going to absolutely love this one. So it's cold and dark. By default, a lot of the switches are on that you need. Fuel control switch is already open by default. Go up top here. That's better. Secondary bus is on. Master ignition on. Alternator switch is on by default, and your master switch is on as well. All you need to do to start this up, prime it a couple of times. Left click on the primer. And click starter switch. Now, parking brake is off by default. Put it on, otherwise you'll keep going forward, even though I've got zero throttle engaged. A quick caveat to the aircraft here. One of the bad things I found when I first loaded this in. See my parking brake there? If I take it off, it won't move forward now because I've put it on initially after I started the engine. You can see the little animation. Move my yoke, you can see the animation. Move my throttle, you can see the animation. When I first installed the aircraft, I didn't get any animations. I put my throttle to full, even though I came down to see it was at 100%, couldn't take off. Nothing would happen. Nothing would work. I couldn't fly the aircraft. What I had to do, if you have the same problem, go to your options, go to your main menu, start a flight in a different aircraft. Don't restart Flight Sim. Just go to a different aircraft. I think I went to the X-Cub or Cub X or whatever it is. Did a quick flight in that. Came back to this aircraft. And then everything was working. I've never come across that in any other aircraft. So I'm thinking it's a problem. It's a bit of an issue with the sort of either Flight Sim or this aircraft itself. But easily fixed. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to taxi to our left there. I believe it's runway 27. I'm going to put a little bit of throttle in, maybe around 10%. Take my parking brake off. You need a tiny amount of throttle. It's a flimsy aircraft. So you've got that big propeller whirring round at the back of your aircraft, and it's giving your aircraft, your tiny aircraft, a lot of momentum, even with something like 10% throttle. So there you go, that's all you need. In fact, I'm going to have to slow down as we approach the runway. Let's just check how much throttle I do have engaged. Going rather fast, there's 6%. Oops. Now, let me get back to my cockpit view. 6% engaged, and look at that, it's thundering along the taxiway. I've got it in Scattered Clouds preset for weather. I tried live weather. It's terrible over this part of Scotland currently. I did it the other day. I had wonderful flight conditions. Just be aware, if you're flying in blusty conditions, it's a flimsy aircraft. You'll be tossed around in the skies. Look at that, approaching the aircraft, 6% throttle. That brake, thankfully, is very effective, as you can see. I'll pull my throttle back just as I taxi onto the runway. Another thing you may have seen in different reviews or different videos. Let's just come to a stop there. That'll do. The flaps didn't seem to be animated properly. They're fine now. I have no trouble with stage 1 or stage 2 flaps. There you go. As you can see, flaps work. I will be utilising them coming into land. Let's just go full throttle. And I'll show you something else that you may need to set if you want to enjoy this aircraft to the fullest. So I'll let it lift off on its own accord there. I'm just full throttle, heading down the centre line of the runway. And as you can see, it's just taking off on its own accord there, no issues. The trim settings. Now, what I had to do, I'm going to show you this again, just in case it confuses you. Go to control options. In this case, I'll go to my throttle quadrant on my velocity one. In flight control services, I basically copied, I went to preset manager, copied my Cessna 172, so duplicated it, and then I renamed it to Aerolite. I just ticked reverse axis, because basically, as you know, if you pull your wheel down, in my case, move my wheel down, it'll trim up, move it up, it'll trim down. It didn't do in this aircraft. I had to reverse the axis to make it more like I'm used to with trim. So if I move my wheel down, it will trim up now, no issues. And I'm going to climb initially to around 750 feet. You can see the airport ahead of us. I've got airport markers on. About 10 nautical miles out, we've got the Floater Isle Airport there. I'm going to head towards that. And if we climb to around 750 feet, let me just trim up. Now, I couldn't find a trim setting in this aircraft, or trim wheel. So I'm not fully sure whether this aircraft, or convinced whether this aircraft does indeed have a trim setting. But, nevertheless, trim works in it anyway. It makes your life a whole lot easier. Believe me on that. I know some Aerolite aircraft apparently do have trim settings. I'm going to come to my right here, so yeah, it's I guess you could say it's fairly realistic for many ultralights. I'm going to come to my right, because the airport, the runway we're landing on is, I believe it's 18, which is going in that direction. 18 or something like that. Our destination airport. and you get more of a better view flying over land. Let's show you some of those views. I've not tried this in VR, but apparently it's pretty spectacular. As you can see, the field of view is wonderful. One of the best field of views in a pay-aware aircraft, or in any aircraft in fact. It's just you and the elements, which is what it should be like. Look at that. Ooh, sense of vertigo there in an ultralight. Wonderful. Let's get to that dynamic view, shall we? Look at that. Wonderful. You can see the machinery moving around there. Wooden propeller spinning, thankfully. You can get some pretty... Let's move the mouse out of the way. Some spectacular views in that next pilot position there. Lovely to see that. Really makes the experience for me. Get back to our default view. Oh, I've gone over our assigned altitude. Doesn't matter. 1,000 feet more or less will be fine. Just going to trim down, and in a matter of seconds, I'm trimmed out. Look at that. Trimmed out already. Very easy to trim. Actually, just throttle back a little bit. Should be going no more than 70 knots, and we're around 65 knots. Now, while we're trimmed out, I didn't show you this, but I will now. There is some sort of manual. Let's just switch to the internet page. Let's hope my aircraft behaves. I'm going to link this website down below. If you scroll down the page, it will say download manual for the Aerolite 103. You download it, bang, 2 pages. Way! Not much to see at all there. Gives you some specifications and overview of the switches. There's not a lot to the Aerolite, to be fair, so what is there is probably adequate. Would have liked to see a little bit more. Let's get back to the sim. How are we doing? Ah, we're not doing too bad. Come off course slightly, so I'll just come to our left there. Again, those spectacular views in VR. This will be stunning, no doubt. Couple of people in the live stream. It was Mark didn't put it on YouTube, I don't believe, unless he's put highlights on. If it has, I'll try and link it, but I don't believe he actually put the multiplayer flight on live stream. It was just a fun flight for Discord members. A number of people in the Discord flight were flying the Aerolite 103 or Aerolites, and they were saying in VR it looked amazing. I've really got to try that. Really got to try that. One of the caveats, another caveat to this though, in the multiplayer flight, I've mentioned it, so I'll mention it here now. As I was flying, and as a number of people were flying in the Aerolite 103, flight we had a mask at times. Once we got near to other people in the multiplayer flight, we had like a mask in the cockpit. It was like a third person, a second person was in the cockpit with us, and it would obscure our view almost completely. A quick way I could fix that is to go cycle the external view and then back into cockpit mode. But obviously it wasn't the best. I've not come across that in other aircraft, so it's obviously some kind of confliction, I'm assuming, between the flight simulator, Microsoft Flight Simulator, and the aircraft itself. Nothing I did could fix that, so I went to weights there, put the payload at 0 for the pilot. Nothing I did there would alter that, and I would often get this mask, almost like a black mask, like a second person in the cockpit with you, once I got near to other players. I've not had much time to test that since. There may be a quick fix. If anybody knows or suggestions, put them down in the comments below. It did ruin the experience somewhat, but cycling the views between external and back into cockpit fixed it for some time. Just be aware of that. Nothing I tried would fix it. And maybe that will be fixed over time. There is something else I'll mention at the conclusion at the end of this video. Let's keep flying now. I'm just going to fly over land. It's more scenic, of course. We're at the right altitude, ideal altitude. As you can see, for that airport being 10 nautical miles out, it's taking us a fair while. In something like the Cessna, will already be landed by now. This is half the speed or less than a Cessna 172. Keep it in mind. If you're going into this, go into it with the ideal of with the mindset of it's a calmer way to fly, a more peaceful way to fly, and then you get a lot more enjoyment out of it. I do. I love flying it, even though it's a very slow aircraft to fly. Like I said, I think VR would be absolutely amazing in this. There's taller hills ahead. I believe we should... Look at that. Beautiful. We should clear those hills. Maybe. May have to raise my altitude slightly. Gonna trim up a little bit because I was slightly out of sync with my trim. There we go. Easily fixed. Back in level flight. No issues there. Lovely calm way to fly, isn't it? Gotta say, I love the views. Let's show you some of the views again. Love the views over the wings. Looking left and right. Makes you feel like you're actually in an ultralight aircraft. Ultralight aircraft. Move your view down. See the ground moving below you there. Absolutely lovely. And that dynamic view. Even though my pilot seems to have disappeared in this view, still love it. Very, very nice. Lovely for screenshots and that type of thing. Wonderful. How are we doing? I can start. Oh, let me just trim up a tiny smudge there. Just to ensure I do clear these hills. Look, the experience you get from this is like no other aircraft. In its own sort of entity there. In terms of experience. Calmness and relax. You can just chill. Go and fly over an area. Scotland has lots of areas like this. Fully recommend flying over Scotland using this aircraft. Taking those sights. Wonderful. Wonderful. Okay, this is Rex Accu season in play for the trees. But still, looks really spectacular with the hills and mountains there to our right. Ah, more like hills, aren't they? The discussion I was having in a recent live streams, flying over Scotland towards Glasgow. People saying, oh, they're just hills, even though they were like 2,000 feet above sea level. When you get to the mountains, you can tell the mountains of Scotland, they are pretty mountainous. Lovely though, look at that view. Still 6 nautical miles out. Oh, the calmer side of flight for sure. We're going to come over to our right a little bit. Won't take us too long now to get to this airport. Blotter Isle Airport. That's lovely. It's an ideal aircraft to sightsee for sure. It's an ideal aircraft to fly over areas like this. Areas I wouldn't normally fly over. Just to take in those lovely views. There we go, let's get an external view for you. Just zoom out a bit so we get the full majesty of that view. Look. Oh. Really sensational, hey? According to the manual, stall speed, let me just double check while we're in that view. So the aircraft doesn't misbehave. I'll just take a quick look at stall speed in clear weather is minus 25 knots. How does that work? Well, apparently that's stall speed. That's what the manual's saying. And there's a range. Full tank of fuel off. Let's just double check. I believe it's 200 kilometers. Where is it now? 105 nautical miles range. Oh, I just pressed the wrong button there. Let me get back to my sim. No, it doesn't matter. Thankfully it was only external view. Closing in on the runway, and then I'll show you how we take... Easy aircraft to land. Mark had us doing a lot of challenges in the multiplayer flight. Had no issues at all with the ultralight, apart from that second person in the cockpit. Kept having to cycle the views like that to get rid of it. Very easy to land. And as you'll see, it stops rather quickly The brakes are pretty powerful on this little aircraft. Oh, am I raising there? Am I climbing, rather? Don't want to climb any more there. In fact, want to descend slightly. Still at full throttle. But descend and you'll see the airspeed get dangerously close. You shouldn't exceed, apparently, according to the manual, 70 knots. Typically you won't unless you're doing a nosedive. Beautiful, isn't it? So relaxing. Done this particular flight a few times, and even though it's slow, I always enjoy it in this aircraft. Always enjoyable. There we go, we'll line up with our runway, maybe a bit off it there. We'll just come to our right a little bit more. I am descending slowly by purpose. Now, when we get closer, we're getting closer now. When we get closer, I'm going to try and decrease our speed. That's something the manual doesn't say, what's your recommended flap speed. But I'm going to decrease our speed below 50 knots. And then engage flaps 1. And if necessary, probably full flaps, second stage of flaps as well, to get us down to 30 knots. And like I said, there should be no danger of stalling the aircraft. Wonderful, so easy to fly, so easy to start up. Like I said, I'll give my full recommendation at the end of this video. Lovely, lovely. You probably see as we line up with the runway, this bar here, the frame of the aircraft, might be obscuring our view somewhat. I tend to use that previous pilot position to come down to the air. You go, keep it in that view now. You get a much clearer view of what's happening and a closer view of things like your airspeed, vertical speed, and altitude. Let's start decreasing our throttle now. So maybe to 60% throttle or so. Let's just take a close look at the throttle. 56%, so I wasn't far out. And just trim up a little bit. And that'll just encourage our airspeed to come down as well. A little bit more there. Flimsy aircraft, Aerolite. Microlight aircraft, rather. The Aerolite 103, it's a flimsy aircraft. Just be aware of that, so even a bit of throttle will have you going forward. Come back up to this view a second. Don't want it to descend that quickly yet, so I'm just going to trim up. And as you can see, we're getting down to that 50 knots speed. 50 knots, yep, it is. A little bit more power in that. I'm just going to go to flaps 1 now. First stage of flaps. Bit of flare, but it's not so pronounced in this aircraft as with other aircraft. Maybe I've just pulled my throttle back a little bit too much there, so I'm just going to engage a little bit more throttle. So easy to land though. Now we're at 40 knots. When we're over the runway, get nearer to the runway. There, I come down to this view now because my view's obscured. Just move it to the right slightly so I can see where the runway is. No issues. No issues at all. Pull my throttle back a little bit more so we start descending. Not too much. Second stage of flaps. I want to go a little bit slow. As you can see now, we're getting towards that 30 knots speed. Ideal. Ideal. Below 30 knots now. We'll just get over the runway here. Start descending. Pull back my throttle. So full flaps. Judging our landing here. White centre line again, but that's not unusual for me. You don't want to pull your throttle all the way because you'll have no power going into the aircraft. So maybe at minimum 10% to land until you're right over the runway. Then you can pull back your throttle completely. Doing a bit of a long landing here, but there's no issues. Very easy to land short on this with this aircraft as well. Oops. Okay, well we're down. We're down, and there you go. Engagement brake. we pretty much stopped immediately, as you saw. So the brakes, you can stop on a sixpence with this thing quite easily. Let's just clear the runway, as there might be other people in this part of the world. I mean, North Europe server, so there are a few people about, and they may wish to land here. Engage the parking brake, get outside, raise my flaps. So there you go, chaps. That's the Ultralight 103 review and short flight. I love it, personally. Now, I got it on a deal, sort of, what was it, maybe 30-40% off deal. So I paid $8.39 for it, I believe. I believe the full price is £15 per pound. At $8.39, it's priced correctly. It should be £10 or less for me for what the aircraft is. Fully recommended if you can get it on a sort of 50% off, 40% off, or whatever it was. Below £10. I fully recommend it for that price. At full price, you may just want to wait until it's on sale. Another slight caveat or disadvantage is that I believe the designers, so Nemeth Designs, have now disbanded from what I've been reading on the internet. I'm not sure how true that is. If it is true, if you get a sim update and something goes wrong with this aircraft and it needs to be updated, it may not be updated in the future. Keep that in mind. There's not a lot that can go wrong with it. It's just that you may not see any future updates with it if they have disbanded. Aside from that, if you can get it on sale, absolutely go for it. I love it personally. There is a love-hate relationship with this aircraft, apparently, reading the forums and other people's views on it. I recommend it, but I'm going to leave it up to you to decide. Let me know your thoughts below, especially if you have this aircraft already. Let me know your thoughts on it. Give the video a like if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe for more lovely calm flight. And I'll see you very soon.